August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, 1987, the fourth play in his 10-part Pittsburgh cycle, explores the tension between legacy and progress, tradition and ambition, and memory and materialism. Set in Pittsburgh in 1936 during the Great Depression, the play centers around a prized family heirloom, a piano adorned with carvings that depict the family's history, including their enslaved ancestors. The central conflict arises between siblings Bernice and Boy Willie, who disagree on what should be done with the piano. While Boy Willie wants to sell it to buy land, Bernice wants to keep it to preserve the family legacy. Wilson uses the piano as a potent symbol to interrogate African American identity, historical trauma, and generational responsibility. Setting and background: the play is set in the Charles family home in Pittsburgh. Bernice lives there with her uncle Doker and her young daughter Maritha. The piano, intricately carved with depictions of the family's lineage, dominates the living room, physically and symbolically. Doker, a former railroad cook, provides the historical context. The piano originally belonged to the Sutter family, who owned Bernice and Boy Willie's ancestors as slaves. Bernice and Boy Willie's grandfather, Willie Boy, carved their family's images into the piano. Later, their father was killed while trying to retrieve the piano from the Sutter household. Arrival of Boy Willie and Lyman. The play begins with the unexpected arrival of Boy Willie and his friend Lyman from Mississippi. Boy Willie, charismatic and impulsive, announces that he intends to sell the family piano to buy land from the Sutter estate. He believes that owning land will grant him independence and affirm his manhood. Bernice, however, refuses to part with the piano. She views it not as property, but as a sacred object that embodies their family's suffering and survival. The piano, for her, is a link to ancestry, not a commodity. Tension escalates as both sides argue over the piano's fate. Bernice accuses Boy Willie of desecrating their legacy, while Boy Willie accuses Bernice of clinging to the past out of fear and sentimentality. The supernatural element. Throughout the play, supernatural elements complicate the story. The ghost of Sutter, the former slaveholder, haunts the Charles household. Bernice believes that Sutter's death, he fell into a well, is linked to Boy Willie's presence. The house becomes increasingly tense with spiritual disturbances, which culminate in a dramatic exorcism. The haunting reflects the family's unresolved trauma. Wilson blends the realism of African American daily life with a spiritual and ancestral world, suggesting that the past is alive and demanding acknowledgement. Climax and resolution. The conflict peaks when Boy Willie attempts to physically remove the piano. Bernice confronts him, and the ghost manifests violently. In desperation, Bernice plays the piano and calls upon her ancestors to help banish the spirit. This act, her first time playing since her husband's death, restores balance to the household. Ultimately, Boy Willie relinquishes his claim to the piano and decides not to sell it. The play ends with a sense of reconciliation. The family, having confronted its past and honored its ancestors, finds a measure of peace. Character analysis. Bernice Charles. Bernice is the moral center of the play. She is a widow, cautious and fiercely protective of her family's legacy. Though emotionally repressed, she carries the weight of generational trauma. Her refusal to sell the piano stems not from sentimentality but from reverence. Her development culminates in the final scene, when she finally plays the piano and calls on her ancestors for strength. This act of spiritual communion symbolizes her reclaiming her voice and embracing her heritage actively rather than passively. Boy Willie. Boy Willie is bold, practical, and energetic. He represents a new generation of African Americans seeking economic empowerment. His desire to sell the piano to buy land is not motivated by greed but by a yearning for independence. Boy Willie's flaws lie in his lack of reverence for history. He views the piano as a tool for progress, not a sacred object. Yet, by the play's end, He comes to understand the piano's symbolic power, even if he still believes in pragmatic advancement. Doker Charles. Doker is Bernice and Boy Willie's uncle and a wise, stable presence in the house. He serves as the play's historian, providing the family's backstory and contextualizing the significance of the piano. Doker believes in letting others make their own decisions, but he respects the gravity of their heritage. Lyman. Boy Willie's companion, Lyman is shy and gentle, a foil to Boy Willie's assertiveness. Lyman represents possibility and romantic yearning. He is taken with Bernice and dreams of starting a new life in the North. His presence highlights the hope and uncertainty facing African Americans during the Great Migration. Avery Brown. Avery is a preacher who is courting Bernice. He embodies Christian values and offers to bless the house to rid it of the ghost. He also encourages Bernice to move forward in life. Avery's failure to exorcise the ghost, however, suggests that spiritual healing must come from within the family, not external institutions. Whining Boy. Whining Boy is Doker's older brother, a washed-up musician and gambler. He provides comic relief but also poignant insight into the burdens of black manhood and the cost of artistic expression. His nostalgia and regret contrast with Boy Willie's ambition. Major themes. Legacy versus progress. At the heart of the piano lesson is the question: what should be done with the past? Bernice wants to preserve the piano as a legacy. Boy Willie wants to use it as a means to secure economic progress. Both perspectives have merit. Wilson refuses to take sides. Instead, he dramatizes the need to find a balance between honoring the past and building a future. True progress, the play suggests, requires an understanding of history, not its erasure. The power of ancestry and memory. The carved piano is more than a physical object, it is a vessel of memory. Through it, the family's history, slavery, love, loss, resilience, is preserved. The supernatural elements underscore the reality that the dead are not truly gone. They remain part of the living. When Bernice plays the piano in the final scene, she is not merely making music. She is invoking the strength of those who came before. Memory becomes both a burden and a source of empowerment. African American identity and history. Wilson emphasizes the importance of African American self-definition. The characters struggle with how to define success and manhood in a racist society. Boy Willie believes land ownership is the answer. Bernice seeks spiritual and familial strength. The piano stands in for African American history, crafted through suffering and survival. By centering the narrative on Black experiences and oral history, Wilson asserts the richness and complexity of African American identity. Family and intergenerational conflict. The play explores how families grapple with inherited trauma. Bernice and Boy Willie represent different responses to that trauma: preservation versus transformation. Their arguments are not merely personal, they reflect broader generational shifts within the African American community. Yet, despite their differences, the family remains bound by love and shared history. The play advocates for reconciliation through mutual understanding. Supernatural as cultural expression. Wilson incorporates ghosts and spirituality not as fantasy but as expressions of African American cultural consciousness. The Ghost of Sutter and the climactic exorcism reflect African-derived traditions that acknowledge the spiritual realm as part of everyday life. The supernatural in the piano lesson is a metaphor for unresolved history. It cannot be ignored, only confronted and honored. Symbolism. The piano. The piano is the central symbol of the play. It is both a literal object and a metaphorical embodiment of the Charles family history. Its carvings tell the story of slavery, resistance, and survival. To Bernice, the piano is sacred, an ancestral altar. To Boy Willie, it is capital, a means to an end. To the audience, it is a symbol of the African American experience, beautiful, painful, and powerful. Ghost of Sutter. The ghost represents the lingering presence of slavery and racial injustice. It haunts the family until they confront the past directly. Only by invoking the ancestors, through Bernice's playing, can the ghost be banished. Music. Music is both a literal and symbolic element in the play. It represents communication with the past, especially when Bernice plays the piano. It also reflects the cultural memory embedded in African American art forms like spirituals, blues, and jazz. Land. Boy Willie's desire for land reflects a historical yearning among African Americans for economic autonomy. Land ownership symbolizes freedom, but Wilson complicates this symbolism by showing that disconnection from history can undermine empowerment. Structure and style. Realism with spiritual elements. While the play adheres to a realistic structure, Wilson incorporates African spiritual traditions and the supernatural. This blend reflects a holistic view of African American life, where the spiritual and material coexist. Dialogue and vernacular. Wilson's use of African American vernacular English, Ave, lends authenticity to his characters. Their voices are rooted in oral tradition, music, and folklore. The dialogue is rhythmic, sometimes humorous, often poetic. Tension and climax. The narrative builds steadily toward confrontation, not only between Bernice and Boy Willie, but between the family and its ghosts. The dramatic arc mirrors the emotional and spiritual journey the characters undergo. Historical and cultural context. Set during the Great Depression, the play reflects African American struggles with poverty, migration, and systemic racism. The northward migration of black families, symbolized by Bernice's move to Pittsburgh, is contrasted with the enduring ties to the Southern land and its painful history. Wilson also draws on African spiritual cosmology, including ancestor veneration, belief in ghosts, and the use of music as a conduit between the living and the dead. These cultural references affirm the richness of Black cultural identity outside the Western canon. Reception and legacy. The piano lesson won the 1987 Pulitzer Prize for Drama and the New York Drama Critics Circle Award. It is considered one of Wilson's finest works and continues to be widely performed and studied. The play has been adapted into a 1995 television movie and a 2022 Netflix film directed by Denzel Washington and starring Samuel L. Jackson. Its themes, family, legacy, race, and reconciliation, remain as relevant today as ever. Conclusion. August Wilson's The Piano Lesson is a profound meditation on memory, identity, and legacy. Through the symbol of the piano, Wilson dramatizes the struggle between remembering the past and shaping the future. The play does not offer easy answers, rather, it challenges audiences to reckon with history and honor it while moving forward. By fusing African American history, folklore, music, and family drama, Wilson creates a work that is both culturally specific and universally resonant. The ultimate lesson of the piano is that true ownership of the past comes not through possession, but through recognition, respect, and storytelling.